Okay, chapter 12. This is a book I wrote, and I'm reading chapters for no good reason. So the epigraph on this chapter is, "In the zone of perdition where my youth went, as if to complete its education, one would have said that the portents of imminent collapse of the whole edifice of civilization had made an appointment." Guy Debord. Growing up, I had my mother all to myself. Now I had to share her with Ken. Ken continued to grab at me and make salacious jokes. He'd rattle the doorknob if he walked past when I was taking a bath. He also took issue with my emerging political identity. We fought constantly. I no longer trusted Mom. I never told her about what Ken was doing. She could see some of it. She occasionally scolded him, but it didn't seem to realize the effect it was having on me. My increasingly withdrawn manner worried her. She no longer trusted me. When I left the house, she ran a hand down my back to make sure I was wearing a bra. I took it off as soon as I was far enough away from the house. I became adept at getting it off with one hand and without taking off my shirt. She threatened to send me to military school. I became determined to keep them both at arm's length until I graduated. I was having far less fun than they imagined. I was still a virgin. I was extremely shy and easily infatuated. I had crushes on all the hippie boys, but I never approached them. I talked about being horny to my girlfriends. I had no idea what horny felt like. I only knew that it was a cool thing to be. I started wearing more rings and more strings of beads and patched blue jeans and with frayed bottoms. I carried around thin, gray dime store notebooks and a purple felt-tip pen. In the cafeteria, in class, in the bleachers by the football field, on a rock by the creek behind the houses in our development, in the back seat of the Dodge Dart that Mom and Ken drove from grocery store to grocery store, always looking for the best deal. At any given moment, I opened the gray notebook and pulled out the purple felt-tip pen to write. Cursive gave way to neat, exacting print. I never capitalized I. When Lee Hellman with the full afro and electric blue eyes was sitting in the pottery wheel at the art studio, at the pottery wheel in the art studio, I sat at the closest table arranging my copy of Magister Ludi, the glass bead game, so it could be seen by Lee, who would know the deep spiritual content of the book and realize the beautiful character of anyone who would read it. Opened my gray notebook, took out my purple felt-tip pen, pushed my two long bangs behind my ear, and I wrote, "He is so close and so focused on his wheel. Why can't he hear the sound of my heart beating, beating?" In English class, Miss Fantini assigned a book, "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden." I found it difficult to read because I was struggling with so much sadness and fear. I thought I might be schizophrenic. I decided to talk to her about my problem. She said she didn't think I was schizophrenic at all. She thought I was homosexual, and the sooner I accepted it, the happier I'd be. I left her office, walked out into the yard where the students hung out. I fell on the ground and began to cry. One of the senior girls, the girl who had been having an affair with the teacher, asked me what was wrong. I held this girl in high esteem. She seemed so sophisticated and mature, and she was quite beautiful. She had long blonde hair, a thin body with large breasts, and a casual way of dressing in paisley-covered Indian fabric. I blurted out Miss Fantini's pronouncement and my associated fear and confusion. She asked me if I had sexual fantasies. Yes. She asked me if they were about men. Yes. She asked me if they were ever about women. No. She asked me if I thought there was anything wrong with being homosexual. No. She laughed. She told me maybe I was bi. She expressed contempt for Miss Fantini's amateur psychoanalysis, and she told me not to worry. She stood up and walked away, leaving me in a patchouli swoon. I was enamored, but was I attracted? I worried about everything. There were so many possibilities, and I felt afraid of them all. Maybe I should be gay. Really cool hippie chicks dripping in exotic paisley and patchouli self-awareness were bi. Maybe I should be bi. But I couldn't even manage to find a hippie boy who wanted to kiss me. Maybe it didn't matter what I was. One day I walked through school looking for drugs. I ate every pill anyone handed me and topped it off with a bottle of aspirin. My ears were ringing and my vision was blurred. One of the girls from my music class noticed my increasing incoherence. I told her not to worry, and I went home. She called my mother. My mother came into my room and asked what I had taken. I told her about the aspirin. She called a hospital, and they assured her that I would not die from aspirin, but that she should get me to a psychiatrist. My mother was completely unable to understand this kind of emotional acting out. In her view, our lives were so much better. We lived in a big new house. I had a, in quotes, father. I went to a psychiatrist for a few sessions. He was a traditional Freudian. He sat behind the desk dressed in a dark blue suit, thick black eyebrows drawn close together, and stared at me. I never mentioned the things that Ken was doing or how I felt about them. He told my mother that I had the emotional maturity of a 3-year-old. All my depression was just my unwillingness to grow up. Mom became increasingly restrictive, but I was permitted to have a part-time job at a local drugstore. I worked at the food counter making grilled cheese sandwiches and French fries, and I babysat. I spent all my money on books and music. I spent most of my time in my room. The headphones from my stereo covered my ears while I sang, read, or painstakingly copied Joni Mitchell lyrics into my gray notebooks. I drew little pictures and wrote down every random thought. I wrote more poetry about Lee. I wrote phone numbers and dates to remember and notes about activities. I bought a new notebook every other week. One day in Brentano's, I noticed a yellow blank book with a pre-Raphaelite woman on the cover, looking very full and self-referential. She wore layers of purple and gold and beads around her neck and scarves wound through her hair. She was the perfect icon of my writing life. I put back the copy of Steppenwolf I had intended to buy and purchased the blank book. The pages of the book were smaller than the ones in the gray books, but there were no lines. I felt tight and set free at equal measures. My printing became economical and my writing became effusive. I filled page after page with contemplation about the nature of love and the limits of my environment and the beauty of Lee. A week later, I was back at Brentano's looking for a new blank book. This one had a Klimt on the cover. It was 1970. In 1969, Nixon had announced the gradual withdrawal of some troops from Vietnam. But in 1970, American troops entered Cambodia. It was clearly an escalation of the war. Demonstrations began in universities across the country. During a demonstration at Kent State University in Ohio, the National Guard fired on a group of student protesters, and 4 students were killed. One of those students, Allison Krauss, had attended Kennedy. Many of the students who were still there had known her. The next day, a group of them tried to lower the flag in front of the school to half-mast. Another group of students who did not support the war attempted to stop them. Another group of students who did not support the anti-war sentiment attempted to stop them. I pushed into the center of the group, pleading with people to stay peaceful. A blonde boy with a crew cut sporting a leather jacket and a pin that read, "America, love it or leave it," stood nose to nose with a boy with long, frizzy black hair. "No fucking way you're going to lower that flag, you fucking hippie freak." "The fucking hippie fascist pig shot her. When are you going to fucking wake up? That flag is a symbol of this country. It's not fucking coming down. The fucking flag has lost all its fucking meaning." Just as I came up behind them, the blonde's fist pulled back to deliver the first blow in the confrontation. His fist met my cheek, leaving an imprint of his class ring. The next day, I wore my battle wound like a badge of honor. The cafeteria was filled with kids talking about what to do. We wanted a revolution, but we weren't sure what that might require of us. Some of us worried about the use of violence. A pile of students crammed into the teacher's lounge, a room we were not normally permitted to use, and we normally didn't mind. The cool teachers normally met us in the hall. But on that day, we weren't content with normal. We needed to break through the walls of the establishment. Mr. Snyder happened to be in the lounge. We wanted to talk to him right away. I sat on a table, legs crossed. A friend leaned against my back, head propped on my shoulder. Another sat on the floor in front of me, leaning back into my knees. We listened with rapt attention while he spoke. The thing you have to understand about a revolution is that you can't just go to a demonstration and then go home to your comfortable suburban home, smoke dope, and raid your parents' refrigerator and listen to your stereo. If you are really committed to revolution, there will be times when you're hungry, scared, and tired. You will be harassed by the police, arrested on false charges, beaten. You may need to go underground. You will lose contact with friends and family. You will not know who to trust, he said, sotto voce. The entire time he pushed on an empty Coke can, smashing it between his hands. When the can was completely mangled, he sat it on the table and stopped talking. Mr. Snyder had given a class on LSD psychotherapy. During one class, he sat, saying nothing, staring at us. During another, he pulled his chair up behind us and again said nothing. Rumor was that he came to class on LSD. Students had a variety of reactions to his tactics. Some talked about the book, some wrote on the board, some had emotional breakdowns. Some walked out. I stopped going to class. One day, Mr. Snyder approached me in the hall. You aren't coming to class. Nope. If you don't come, I have to give you an F. I tried not to look at him. Okay. So you aren't coming back? Nope. Can I ask you why? I took a deep breath, my voice trembling with fear and petulance. I expect most teachers to fuck with my head. I just didn't expect it of you. When the grades came out, I received an A+. I knew Mr. Snyder was trying to teach us things about the way he saw the world. He rarely said things in a direct or discursive manner. He experimented with us. I was never absolutely sure what he wanted us to figure out, but I concluded that my A+ suggested I was onto something. Now I stared at the crumpled Coke can and wondered if I really wanted to be a revolutionary. In an attempt to create some dialogue about the war and the campus unrest, our principal held a debate with Rennie Davis, a leader of the SDS and a member of the Chicago 7. He was an articulate, handsome man. The debate didn't do much in terms of easing tensions between student factions, but it romanticized the revolution for me. Now, at 17, in my high school auditorium, listening to Rennie Davis and my principal debate the war in Vietnam, pardon me, I felt my own developing mistrust in the social institutions of my country. My developing political consciousness was fed with arrows. A few months before my 18th birthday, I became frenzied about losing my virginity. It wasn't revolutionary to still be a virgin when you were 18. I got permission from my mother to spend the night at a friend's house. My friend and I went to the local youth center where I found someone selling cocaine. My friend bought baby food jars and with various kinds of alcohol that she stole from her parents' supply. We had pot. Now we had our supplies. We found some friends who were going to Georgetown. In Georgetown, the legal age for buying beer and wine was 18. We all had fake IDs. There were little bars and clubs with music. We went from place to place, drinking beer or wine and the harder alcohol in our baby food jars. We smoked the pot in the alley behind the bars and did the cocaine in the bathrooms. I was looking for someone, anyone. Love would be nice, but sex was the goal. But the night wore on, and too soon we got in the car to head home. When we stopped at a traffic light, I looked out the window to a car next to us. There was a reasonably cute hippie boy. I said, "Wanna fuck?" Of course he did. Somewhere between Washington, D.C. and Maryland in the middle of the night, I got into a car with two young men I didn't know, so that I could have sex and not be a virgin when I turned 18. My girlfriend went with me. We made pointless introductory conversation. There was no need for seduction. I was ready. They said they were John Davidson and David Johnson. We didn't believe them. They showed us their IDs. My friend wasn't interested in either John Davidson or David Johnson. She had to fight off one of them while I went to park with the other one of them and had sex. She kept calling to me to hurry up, and as soon as I felt his penis in my vagina, I was done. David Johnson, or John Davidson, was not quite done and was completely dismayed that I wanted to go home. The next time someone asked me, I could say, "No, I'm not a virgin."